You are listening to Contraband.
Welcome back to the Wake Up Call. I'm Michael Harriot, and we're continuing our series on the baddest squads and groups in Black history. Today, we're going to talk about the McIntosh Militia. On January 15th, 1865, General Sherman issued Special Field Order number 15, giving 40 acres in Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida to Black people. Well, the person that they put in charge of distributing that land was Tunis Campbell. Tunis Campbell was born in New Jersey. He became a head waiter in New York City at the Howard Hotel, which during the kind of early to mid 1800s, being a head waiter working in hotels was a job that was mostly held by Black people. After a few years, if you wanted a waiter period in New York, you got to go see Tunis Campbell. Like everything you know about waiting, about hotel management, a lot of it came from a book that Tunis Campbell wrote called Hotel Keepers, Head Waiters, and Housekeepers Guide. Nobody knew where he was getting all of these great waiters and bellhops from. It turns out most of the people that he was recommending had escaped slavery from the South. He was basically establishing jobs for all of these fugitive enslaved people. So when the Civil War broke out, he got a contract with the federal government to supply 4,000 Black soldiers to the United States military. So when General Sherman wrote Field Order number 15, Tunis Campbell went to McIntosh County on the Sea Islands, like in the lower half of Georgia. And he started telling the new freedmen, hey, if you really want some power, you're going to have to get some land. They couldn't really buy land because they weren't citizens yet. The 14th Amendment hadn't been passed, so they were prevented from owning land. But Tunis Campbell wasn't. So he established a cooperative called the Black Landowners Association. And by the time they rescinded Special Field Orders number 15 and gave the land back to the Confederate landowners and enslavers, Tunis Campbell and the Black Landowners Association had purchased 1,250 acres in McIntosh County, and it became like the center of Black power. Tunis Campbell was elected to the state Senate. He became Justice of the Peace. McIntosh County established schools. They started registering people to vote. And just to make sure like nothing happened to the people, they established the McIntosh Militia. So remember, after the Civil War, to be readmitted back into the Union, every state had to submit a new constitution. Well, Tunis Campbell was a delegate to the Georgia Constitutional Convention, and he put equal suffrage. They actually had equal suffrage for men and women, but, the white people voted it down. But it gave Black men the right to vote. It put the 14th Amendment into the state constitution. And white people were so mad, like they enacted a campaign of violence to reinstall white supremacy throughout the state. They couldn't do it in McIntosh because of the McIntosh Militia. They essentially went to war with the Klan. Georgia had already elected 33 Black state senators and state representatives to the state legislature. But by then, Tunis Campbell's plan had gone into effect. See, people thought that the land in McIntosh County was worthless. Instead of growing cotton or food or rice, and these Black landowners just started cutting down trees, and everybody was thought, like, why are you cutting down these trees? You're not going to be able to grow anything on this land. But by 1870, these Black landowners basically controlled the timber industry in the South. By 1870, the Black residents outnumbered white residents in McIntosh County, 3,288 to 1,196. So they started electing all of these Black officials. They called it the Black political base of the South. So when the whites enacted this campaign of violence, they purged all of the Black state elected officials, the original 33, out of office, including Tunis Campbell. That white supremacist terror campaign was so violent, Georgia became the only state in American history to be kicked out of the Union twice for racism. But back to McIntosh County, right? So by 1870, even though whites had, quote unquote, redeemed the state and reinstalled white supremacy, disenfranchised Black people, they couldn't do anything with McIntosh County because of the McIntosh Militia. Tunis Campbell eventually moved back up north to Boston, but there was somebody who took his place. His name was Henry DeLegal. Henry DeLegal was, for all intents and purposes, the successor to Tunis Campbell. He was in charge of the Loyal League that organized black voters and kept and maintained a black political power base. One of the cities in McIntosh County was Darien, Georgia. It was a small little city, had 1,700 residents, but 1,000 of them were black. Henry DeLegal owned a bunch of land called the DeLegal Settlement. He lived near this white landowner named James Wallace, and Wallace hated that DeLegal owned so much land. James Wallace had a daughter named Matilda, and Matilda's husband left her. And like right after he left her, she had a baby, but the baby was mixed race. So James Wallace got his daughter to say that Henry DeLegal had, quote unquote, outraged, which was the white term for sexual assault back then, had outraged her. And that Henry DeLegal was the father of her baby. But Henry DeLegal knew that basically that accusation meant that he would be lynched. He turned himself in, they put him in the jail and waited for him to be transported to Savannah for trial. But everybody knew that when they brought him out to transport him to Savannah, that the white folks were going to lynch him. So the McIntosh militia showed up. First, they established watchmen and shifts all around town to make sure that the Klan wouldn't show up. Then one person was stationed at the Black Baptist Church, and their job was to ring the bell at the church if they saw any white people headed into Darien. So every time the sheriff tried to take Henry out of the jail to put him on the train, the bell would ring, and out of nowhere, all of these black men would show up and surround the jail. They didn't go into the jail and try to free Henry. They didn't do anything but stand there with their guns and say, hey, this man is going to have due process. So eventually the governor sent 200 white men, mostly former Confederates, down to McIntosh County. They were met by 400 members of the McIntosh militia. So they brokered an agreement with Henry's son, who said, yeah, you know what? Y'all can take him. We just wanted to make sure he was going to have due process. The white dudes were like, yeah, man, we must have scared these dudes. They had no idea, though, that the McIntosh militia had bought all the train tickets. So they were going to ride the train all the way to Savannah and make sure that nothing funny happened with Henry. And Henry did make it safe. But after he made it to Savannah, the white posse began arresting members of the McIntosh militia on the order of the governor and charging them with insurrection. And when they tried to arrest Henry's sons, the McIntosh militia showed up again. It's like, nah, y'all not going to do this. Y'all know how we do. It's going to be due process. One of the white posse members, Robert Townsend, not the dude from I'm Going to Get You Sucker, forced his way into the house and tried to arrest Henry's sons. And Henry's sons killed Robert Townsend. So technically they did get that sucker. And then they killed another deputy. The governor arrested 58 men and 5 women and charged them with insurrection. They charged the 2 sons with inciting a riot. They eventually dropped charges against most of the men that they arrested for insurrection, not because they were kind or anything, but because black people owned so much of the land and so much of the businesses. They just shut down the town until they released their friends and neighbors. And when Henry went to court and presented his case, there was a hung jury. 7 wanted to convict him, 5 wanted to acquit him. So when his sons went to court, they changed the venue to a whole different county. They were convicted for murdering a law officer. But when they appealed, the Supreme Court said, well, they weren't actually law officers. They were never sworn in. They were just some white dudes. So the charges for inciting a riot was dropped, but, one of the sons was still convicted of killing Robert Townsend. Now, if you look this up in history books, they call this the Darien Insurrection. But here was the real insurrection. When those white terrorists so-called redeemed the state, they purged Tunis Campbell and those original 33 legislators out of the state government. By the turn of the century, in 1900, there was literally only one black legislator in the entire state of Georgia, William H. Rogers. When he ran in 1902, his opponents launched a campaign to get the last black state representative out of office, and they lost. Rogers won again in 1904. And he won again in 1906. But in 1907, the Georgia legislature passed a law that explicitly disenfranchised any black voter in the state. there wouldn't be another black legislator elected in Georgia until 1963. And the way they got the lily white Republicans to support the bill was to target Rogers District with the motto, "Remember the Darien Insurrection, redeem McIntosh County." And that's the story of the McIntosh Militia and the Black Insurrection.
You are listening to Contraband.